1. They paid him to guard a wild Apache, but when he saw her, he knew he had to set her free. The sun hung low over the Wyoming plains, gilding the dust in amber light as if the land itself remembered every hardship ever endured here. Tayen stood beside the rattling wagon, her wrists bound with rough hemp that chafed against skin bronzed by wind and sun. Her eyes, sharp, unyielding, surveyed the horizon with the attentiveness of a predator, yet they carried a shadow of someone who had known too much loss. The wind tugged at her short, tan suede two-piece, rustling the beadwork that traced her frame, and she lifted her chin, defiance etched into every line of her posture. Elias Boone's horse shifted nervously beneath him as he approached, boots sinking slightly into the sun-baked soil. 34 years had carved lines into his face and set a quiet heaviness in his shoulders, but his eyes, dark, discerning, and haunted, lingered on Tayen longer than his duty demanded. He had been paid to guard her, to ensure she remained captive until the job was done, but the moment their gazes met, a quiet tension stirred in him, unfamiliar and discomfiting. He wondered briefly if the plains themselves had conspired to put this wild woman in his path. Tayen's lips curved faintly in amusement, though no sound escaped. She had been caged before, by men, by circumstances, by cruel fate, and yet there was something in this stranger that unsettled her. He did not approach like the others, with a swagger or an assumption of ownership. He moved carefully, deliberately, like someone trying not to break something fragile and dangerous all at once. The irony was not lost on her. He was a guard, yet he carried the gentleness of a man who had known loneliness too long. Elias dismounted slowly, the leather of his gloves creaking as he tethered his horse. He noted the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands, and the way her dark braids, loosened at the ends, caught the sunlight. The plains were silent except for the whisper of the wind, and in that silence he felt the enormity of his task press upon him. Yet beneath that weight was a strange, insistent curiosity. He could not turn his eyes away from her, nor his mind from the questions she stirred in him. Who had tried to break her? What had kept her wild? And why, despite her defiance, did he feel an urge to protect her beyond reason? The first words he spoke were measured, cautious. "Tayen," he said, almost unsure of himself. "I'm Elias Boone." "I'll be," he paused, swallowing back the word guard that felt suddenly too harsh in the presence of her quiet dignity. "I'll be watching over you." She studied him, expression guarded, lips pressed together. "Watching," she repeated, her voice low and edged with irony. "Some call it guarding. Others call it imprisonment." Her gaze flicked to the horizon, then back to him. "Which are you?" The question hung in the air, charged and unyielding. Elias could feel the weight of it, the expectation that he would answer as a man of men would, yet he found himself faltering. His hand went instinctively to the leather strap at his side, though there was no gun drawn. The gesture was more for himself than her. I suppose it depends on what you need me to be," he said finally, surprising both of them. A flicker of something softened her eyes, though she did not give it name. Tayen had been alone for too long, hardened against kindness, yet this man did not strike her as the others had. He neither sneered nor assumed, nor did he seek to overpower. There was restraint in him, and in the restraint lay a spark of possibility. The day stretched on, a slow and dusty expanse of muted gold. Tayen shifted where she stood, each movement deliberate, testing his reaction, probing the boundaries of her cage and his conscience. Elias remained patient, silently observing, offering water without words, adjusting the ropes against her skin when the fibers cut too sharply. Small gestures, unnoticed by anyone else, yet in them a quiet understanding began to take root. She watched him as he moved among the plain shadows, noting how his hands worked with care, how his eyes lingered on things that mattered. Hours passed with a gentle tension, the kind that made silence feel intimate rather than empty. Tayen's mind drifted to the choices that had led her here, to the moments when freedom had been stripped from her. She thought of the men who had underestimated her, who had sought to bend her will. Yet in Elias Boone's presence, a new question began to germinate, one she dared not voice. Could a man like him, steady and unyielding, become the conduit to her own freedom? Even as the sun dipped lower, painting the world in molten gold, Elias felt the pull of her spirit. Like a tide, he could not resist. He had known loneliness as a companion, silence as a teacher, and the ache of unspoken regret as a shadow at his back. But something about Tayen's defiance, the curve of her jaw, the fire behind her dark eyes, made him reconsider everything he thought he knew about duty, about desire, about the narrow paths a man is supposed to walk. A sudden movement in the brush made both of them freeze. Tayen's breath hitched, but it was not fear. It was instinct, honed by years of survival. Elias reached out, hand hovering near hers, not touching, just present, a silent promise that he would not abandon her in that moment. The rustle subsided, leaving only the whisper of wind through the tall grasses. Yet the connection lingered, electric, undeniable. They made camp as twilight descended, the first stars timidly peeking through the fading light. The firelight flickered across Tayen's features, illuminating her sharp cheekbones and the softness beneath, the moments of vulnerability she allowed herself to reveal in the quiet. Elias settled nearby, close enough to offer comfort, but distant enough to respect her space. They shared no words at first, only glances and the occasional sigh of the wind through the plain. Tayen's gaze softened imperceptibly as she watched him work the small fire, tending it with care and patience. Elias, in turn, caught himself marveling at her resilience, at the way she commanded the land even while bound by circumstance. As the night deepened, their conversation began in fragments, questions about the land, about the wind, about what it meant to survive. Each exchange was a step toward understanding, toward trust, though neither would have admitted it aloud. Tayen's sharp humor pierced the tension, her laughter light and cautious, and for the first time in many months, Elias felt a warmth he thought lost forever. The fire crackled between them, a small island of light in a vast sea of darkness. Elias wondered if he was breaking the rules of the world, or simply discovering a truth he had ignored too long. Tayen's eyes reflected the flames, a flicker of curiosity and guarded hope mingled in their depths. And as they drifted toward uneasy sleep beneath the stars, each aware of the other's presence, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They were both alone, yet together in a way that neither had anticipated. The plains around them seemed to hold their breath, the night carrying the promise of decisions yet to be made, of dangers and choices looming in the dawn. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the wind whispered of freedom, of possibilities, of paths neither had dared to walk before. And in that quiet, suspended moment, Elias Boone and Tayen found themselves poised on the edge of something neither duty nor circumstance could fully contain. The night deepened, and with it, the question that neither could yet speak aloud lingered like the stars above. Would they follow the pull of the heart, or remain bound by the chains of expectation? The plains glowed in the soft light of late afternoon, golden and warm, as if the world itself paused to witness what was about to unfold. Elias stood beside his horse, heart racing, his eyes never leaving Tayen. She stood before him, the wind teasing the edges of her short suede dress, dark braids swaying gently, her lips parted slightly as though expecting something unspoken. The distance between them felt infinite and yet impossibly small. Elias took a tentative step forward. "Tayen," he murmured, his voice low and raw with a tenderness he had never allowed himself to feel before. "I cannot imagine a life without you. Not as a guard, not as a man, not as anyone." Her gaze softened, and for the first time, the fierce defiance melted into something fragile and true. She stepped closer, their breaths mingling in the warm air. "Elias." She began, but the words caught in her throat, drowned out by the quiet pulse of the plains around them. He reached for her hands, roughened by work yet gentle in their touch, and held them as though the world might shatter if he let go. "You are free now, Tayen," he whispered. "And I want to be yours if you'll let me." Her eyes glistened with unspoken emotion. Slowly, deliberately, she closed the last of the distance, leaning into him. The first brush of lips was soft, questioning, a tender collision of hearts long restrained. The world seemed to fall away, the wind, the distant mountains, even the sun itself, fading behind the horizon, leaving only the warmth and certainty of their embrace. They pulled back slightly, foreheads resting together, hearts hammering in tandem. Tayen laughed softly, a sound both light and profound, and whispered, "I never thought I could feel like this again." "You always could," Elias said, voice thick with emotion. "I just had to see it." As twilight painted the sky in shades of rose and violet, the two of them mounted their horses and rode to the little wooden chapel at the edge of the settlement. Friends, neighbors, and a few kindly souls from town gathered, but the air around Tayen and Elias was intimate, a bubble of shared destiny. Their hands intertwined, fingers locked, each small touch speaking volumes. The ceremony was simple, yet every word carried weight. When the preacher asked if they took each other in marriage, Elias felt the certainty in his chest swell beyond measure. "I do," he said, eyes never leaving Tayen's, voice steady but trembling with emotion. Tayen's answer came in a soft, unwavering voice, "I do." And in that moment, the world held its breath. They leaned into each other, lips meeting in a kiss both passionate and tender, a seal upon the love that had grown slowly, patiently, in the quiet corners of dusty plains and starry nights. Every past hurt, every trial, every quiet gesture that had bound them together culminated in that kiss, full of promise, freedom, and belonging. Afterward, they stepped back, hands still entwined, gazing at one another as the crowd murmured congratulations. But for them, there was no one else, only the warmth of their hearts and the knowledge that they had chosen each other wholly, fiercely, and without regret. The celebration faded into a quiet evening. They rode back to the plains where it all began, side by side, letting the wind play in their hair. Elias adjusted the blanket around Tayen's shoulders, and she rested her head lightly on his arm. Words were unnecessary. The silence between them was full of the promises of the life they would build together. Later, as night settled over the plains and stars shimmered like scattered diamonds, Elias whispered, "Tayen, my heart was empty before you came. Now it's full of you, full of us." She smiled, brushing her fingers against his cheek. "And mine with you. I never imagined love could be this deep, this freeing." They leaned into each other once more, lips meeting in the quiet intimacy of shared hearts and dreams, a kiss that lingered long into the night. In that embrace, they were not just free, they were home. The plains stretched around them, vast and endless, yet it no longer mattered. Together, they had found a love strong enough to withstand the world, tender enough to soothe their wounds, and enduring enough to carry them into every tomorrow. And so, dear reader, this story whispers a simple truth. The bravest love is one that chooses another without hesitation, that seeks freedom for both hearts, and that honors trust as its guiding light. In the quiet, in the gestures, in the shared breath of a first kiss, life can offer a freedom far greater than any chain ever could.